Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today doing an Obelisk The Tormentor deck profile. So I'm really excited to do this for you guys because this deck summons out one of the most nostalgic monsters of all time, Obelisk The Tormentor. This deck is super fun to be able to play and just turbos Obelisk out to the field extremely quickly. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of Notification Squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name description every single video, getting a signed cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your Patreon. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Obelisk the Tormentor. Obelisk the Tormentor is our main boss monster for the deck, and it's just super cool to base a deck around one of the 3 Egyptian god cards. This card has some awesome effect that requires 3 tributes to normal summon this card, and it cannot be normal set, and this card's normal summon cannot be negated. And when normal summon, cards and effects cannot be activated, and neither player can target this card with card effects. And once per turn, during the end phase, if this card was special summoned, send it to the graveyard. And you can also tribute 2 monsters to destroy all monsters that your opponent controls, but this card can't attack the turn you activate that effect. But that's totally fine because you're summoning out a 4,000 attack point boss monster to your side of the field. We then play a single copy of Keldo. Keldo is really good in this particular deck, and we are playing the Ishizu cards, and we are playing Exchange of the Spirit in this particular build, which is just super cool and nostalgic. But Keldo is a really good one-of in this particular deck for its first effect, that you can discard 1 other Earth Fairy monster to be able to special summon this card from your hand. Then add 1 Exchange of the Spirits or card that mentions it from your deck to your hand, and quick effect, you can manage this card from your field or graveyard and then target up to 3 cards in any graveyard, or 5 if Exchange of the Spirits on your field or graveyard, and shuffle them into the deck, which is a really insane effect. We then play a single copy of Medora. Medora is a good one-of in this particular build because it just recently went to 1, but it also has the ability that you can discard 1 other Earth Fairy monster to be able to special summon this card from your hand. Then you can place 1 Gravekeeper's Trap from your deck face up in your spell and trap card zone, which is just a really cool effect, and it shares the exact same effect as Keldo, that you can shuffle 3 to 5 cards back into the deck from the graveyard. We then play a single copy of Kelbeck. Kelbeck is insane, and it's actually a hand trap, which is just super cool, because if a card is sent from the hand or deck to your opponent's graveyard, except during the damage step, you can start a special summon monster that your opponent controls, and then special summon this card from your hand, then return that monster back to the hand, which is just such a cool effect. And it also has the ability, if this card is sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, you can activate this effect that each player sends the top 5 cards of their deck to the graveyard, or their entire deck if less than 5. Then if Exchange of the Spirit is in the graveyard, you can set a trap from your graveyard to your side of the field. We then play a single copy of Yugioh. Yugioh is a good one-of as well in the deck, and we're just playing a single copy of each of these cards because they did go to 1 on the last list. But Yugioh is one of the best ones in this particular build, because it's going to help us mill out a bunch of cards from the deck. That if a card is sent from the hand or deck to your opponent's graveyard, except during the damage step, then you can special summon this card from your hand, and then you can special summon 1 level 4 Earth Fairy monster from your graveyard to your side of the field. And if this card is sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, you can activate this effect that each player sends the top 5 cards of their deck to the graveyard, or if their entire deck if less than 5. Then if Exchange of the Spirit is in the graveyard, you can send 5 more cards from the top of either player's deck to the graveyard, which usually you're sending 5 cards from your own deck to the graveyard, so you can get Obelisk in the graveyard. We then play 3 copies of Zolga the Prophet. Zolga is a really good 3-of in this particular build, and helps out a lot in this deck because if you control an Earth Fairy monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, then look at the top 5 cards of each player's deck, which is just really, really good to be able to look at those cards and get a little bit of knowledge so that when you mill cards with Yugioh or Kelbeck, you know exactly what you're going to send to the graveyard, which is just really, really good. And when a monster that was normal summoned by tributing this card declares an attack, you can banish this card from the graveyard and destroy that monster, and if you do, inflict 2,000 points of damage to your opponent, which is really good to combo with your copy of Obelisk. We then play 2 copies of Cordan. Cordan is a good 2-of in this deck, but you only really need 2 copies of Cordan in this deck. That when this card is normal summoned, you can set one continuous trap from your hand or graveyard to your side of the field, and it can be activated this turn, which is great to be able to recover your copies of your Gravekeeper's trap from the graveyard if you send it to the grave, which is just really, really good. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can activate this effect that face-up trap cards that you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects until the end of the next turn, which is just super good. We then play 2 copies of World Soul Carbon. World Soul Carbon is a good 2-of in the deck. I don't want to play 3 copies in this build because I feel like it would clog, but it's really good as a 2-of. But you can contribute this normal summon set card to add an Earth Fairy monster from your deck to your hand, except another copy of this card, which is great to be able to add any of your Shizu cards that you need directly from your deck to your hand. We then play 3 copies of Flourishing Hills. Flourishing Hills is great as a 3-of in the deck because it is an Earth Fairy monster, and it has the ability that you can discard this card and one monster or a Vernisylph card to be able to add a Vernisylph card from your deck to your hand, except another copy of this card, which is just a really good effect to be able to send your copies of your Shizu cards to the graveyard, which is just such a good effect. Then you get to special summon one Earth monster from your graveyard, which will get you monsters on your side of the field to tribute summon out your copy of Obelisk. We then play 3 copies of Awakening Forest. Awakening Forest is a really good 3-of as well because it is an Earth Fairy monster, but you can discard this card and one monster or a Vernisylph card to be able to send from your deck to the graveyard one Earth Fairy monster or one Earth monster that can be normal summoned or set. Then you can special summon one Earth monster from your graveyard with a different name from that monster. Also, you cannot activate non-Earth monsters effects for the rest of the turn, which is just such a good effect to be able to send your copies of either Yugioh or Kelbeck from your deck to the graveyard, so you can use your effects to be able to mill additional cards from the deck. This card also has the ability you can target one Vernisylph monster that you control, and its attack becomes double until the end of this turn, which can help out every so often. We then play 3 copies of Misting Seedlings. Misting Seedlings is one of the best cards in the entire deck, that all monsters on the field lose 600 attack except Vernisylph monsters, and you can discard this card and one monster or Vernisylph card, and then you cannot activate non-Earth monster effects for the rest of the turn, but also you get to add one Earth Fairy monster from your deck to your hand, except another copy of this card, which can search out your copies of your Shizu cards so you can use them in this deck. Then you can special summon one Earth monster from your graveyard, which is a great effect to be able to use to just get more monsters on your side of the field so you can tribute out your copy of Obelisk. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Foolish Burial. Foolish Burial is a good one in the deck to be able to get the exact card you need in the graveyard when you need it. We then play 2 copies of Foolish Burial Goods. Foolish Burial Goods is a really good 2-of in the deck, and I did consider playing this card as a 3-of in this build to get a bunch of different cards that we need in the graveyard, like Exchange of the Spirits or even Soul Energy Max into the graveyard from our deck. We then play 3 copies of the Breaking Ruin God. This card is crazy powerful and actually lets us special summon Obelisk to our side of the field, and the activation of this card or its effects cannot be negated, nor can its effects be negated. You special summon out one Obelisk the Tormentor from your hand or grave, and if you do, it's unaffected by your opponent's card effects this turn. And if you tribute 2 or more monsters that you control at the same time to activate your cards or effect, while you control Obelisk Tormentor, you can banish this card from the graveyard and then banish all monsters that your opponent's graveyard, and if you do, you inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent for each card banished, which can actually FTK your opponent depending on the amount of cards your opponent has in the graveyard, which is just absolutely crazy. We then also play 3 copies of Soul Crossing. Soul Crossing is really good because it basically turns your copy of Obelisk into a Kaiju. By tributing 3 of your opponent's monsters, you can just basically summon out your copy of Obelisk, which is just really, really good. But until the end of the next turn, after this card resolves, you cannot only activate one effect, not counting your copy of your Divine Beast monsters effect, which is not that big of a deal because we've already got a 4,000 attack point Obelisk on our side of the field off this card. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Soul Energy Max. This card is super cool as a 3 in the deck and actually searches out your copy of Obelisk. If you control Obelisk the Tormentor, whose original attribute is Divine, in your monster zone, you can tribute 2 other face-up monsters and destroy as many monsters that your opponent controls as possible, and if you do, inflict 4,000 points of damage to your opponent, which is just crazy powerful that you can just do 4,000 points of damage to your opponent. It also has the ability that during the main or battle phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard to add 1 Obelisk the Tormentor from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Then immediately this effect resolves, you can normal summon Obelisk the Tormentor, which is just super cool to instantly summon out Obelisk with this card's effect. We then play 3 copies of Exchange of the Spirits. Exchange of the Spirits is a key card in this particular deck, and you always want to get this card directly into the graveyard, but it can come up every so often that you will activate this card. That if both players have 15 or more cards in their graveyard, you pay 1,000 life points, and each player switches the cards from their graveyard with the cards in their deck, and then shuffles the new deck, which is crazy that you can basically just do that. And you can only activate this card once per duel, but that's just really cool, the amount of chain links that are going to go off by switching your graveyard with your main deck. We then play 2 copies of Gravekeeper's Trap. Gravekeeper's Trap is just a great 2 of in this deck. I feel like any more than 2 copies this card breaks, but I really like 2 copies in this deck because while Exchange of Spirits is in your graveyard, your opponent cannot activate the effects of cards in the graveyard or special summon monsters from the graveyard, and you can only use the following effects this card once per turn. That during the main phase, you can discard a card to add a Gravekeeper or an Earth Fairy monster from your deck to your hand. And then during your opponent's draw phase, before they draw their normal card, if this card is already face up on the field, you can declare 1 card name, look at the card that your opponent has drawn for their normal draw, and if it was the declared card, you send it to the graveyard, which combos extremely well with your copy of Zolga, because you can look at the cards on the top of your opponent's deck, which is just super cool. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing a lot of toolbox cards in the extra deck, and we're going to start off with a single copy of number 60. Number 60 is really good in this particular deck because it can either let you draw 2 and discard 1, bring back a monster from your graveyard in defense, or it can let you double the attack of a monster, which is just really good to be able to double the attack of your copy of Obelisk, boosting it up to 8,000. We then play a single copy of Abyss Dweller. Abyss Dweller is just really good to lock down the graveyard, and it's a great generic card in this deck. 1 copy of number 41, Baguska. Baguska is really good at just stalling out the opponent, just in case you need to. 1 copy of number 39, Utopia, because we're always going to be making a copy of S39, Utopia the Lightning, which will get us a 5,000 attack point monster on our side of the field so that we can go in for game. We then play a single copy of Gustav Max. Gustav Max is really good in this deck because you can summon 2 obelisks extremely easily, and this card doing the additional 2,000 burn damage is just really, really good. We then play a single copy of Juggernaut Lieb. Juggernaut Lieb can be made on top of Gustav Max, which is really good in this particular deck to be able to just OTK the opponent. We then play a single copy of Double A Zeus. Double A Zeus is really good at board wiping the field. It's just a great one with all the other XZs that we're playing. We then play a single copy of Access Code. Access Code is one of the best cards in the entire extra deck to be able to pop multiple cards on the field and come out absolutely massive. We then play a single copy of Appaloosa. Appaloosa is a great card to put on your side of the field to have multiple monster negates, and it's just a great card overall. 1 copy of Nightmare Unicorn to spin stuff, Phoenix to pop spells and traps, and Cerberus to pop monsters. These are just really good for any situation and are great cards in any extra deck. We then play a single copy of Mrs. Radiant because we are playing a bunch of Earth Fairies, and boosting them up by 500 attack points can actually equal a lot of damage for the opponent. And finally, a single copy of IP Masquerade to be able to make Unicorn during the opponent's turn so we can spin a card back, which is really good. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed. This deck is super fun to be able to play. If you guys have never played an Obelisk The Tormentor deck, you guys should definitely give this deck a try because it's super fun to be able to play with all the Ishizu cards in this particular deck. It's like Ishizu kept Obelisk The Tormentor for Battle City and just entered it for herself instead of giving it to Kaiba, which is just really funny to think about. So that's it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell next to become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.